Yo, what's up, my fellow Transformers? It's Marcus Hart here, and today we're diving deep into a guest who traded spreadsheets for self discovery. Bayou, an engineer turned life coach, is here to help us break free from those shoulds and write a life story that actually lights up our fire. So, buckle up because this is about to get real. All right, now,
Come with me, let's rap. Take a trip and we back. And we'll be right back. I stand for what you stand for. Hey, I get on the mic and I transform. Follow me on this world tour. The asteroid that you can't avoid. Follow me.
Bayou's got this whole co-creator of your life thing going on, which might sound a bit woo-woo at first, but trust me, this ain't no manifest your dream life BS. This is about ditching the autopilot and actually choosing the kind of life that makes you want to jump out of bed, not just hit the snooze button. So Bayou, my man, you've been there, you had a successful career, but something was missing. So for those of us that stuck in our own golden handcuff situation, like we kind of talked about before when we first, connected, what's the first step to even realizing we have a choice?
Thank you, Marcus, for the intro. Yeah, so in my experience, as you mentioned before, I've built my life in the direction in becoming an engineer. I went to Germany to study engineering, and I spent years and years of my life focusing on it without even asking myself, what is it actually that I want? I was just
Yeah.
so busy, moving forward, going full throttle because of the mindset that I had. Oh, I need to become the best as quick as possible. So I just keep
Yeah.
working and working and working. And then at one point in my life, I was blessed that I met mindfulness practice. So this is a
Mhm.
separate point in my life first. There was no crisis yet at this point. I met mindfulness practice and I did it and it became a habit in my life. So move on again to becoming the engineer. I finished my study in Germany and then I work as an engineer. And in a
Mhm.
very relatively short time, I got promoted and became a regional manager.
Hmm.
So then I was super excited because if you can imagine, I almost kind of like had a list what I want to achieve in my life. And
Yeah.
by becoming that regional manager, I almost checked everything that's on the list. I want to have a
Mm.
big home. I want to drive a car from the company. I want to wear like this one. I want to wear a suit and then having meetings with all the important people in the companies. I want to have
Mhm.
my own names in front of the office. And I had everything.
Mhm.
In the biggest space that I've lived in my life, I felt empty.
Mhm.
I felt like something is missing, but I'm not sure what it is.
Mhm.
Now, in retrospect, now also with having conversations with a lot of people, actually it's not something rare that we meet this point in our lives when we already realize like something is not right. It's like kind of like a
Right.
gut feeling. But the main difference that I did at that point is I did not look away from that uncomfortable feeling.
Mhm.
Instead, I explored that feeling, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And as I mentioned before, it was super uncomfortable because my whole identity was connected with what I was doing. My whole identity of, the student from Indonesia going to Germany, studying to become an engineer, now becoming a successful engineer, now that I have it all, just to find out that it's not what I want.
Yeah.
That's all. For me, it was an existential question, like, okay, if not this, and then what,
Yeah.
So, to answer your questions, like, what was it? Now I can also see that the mindfulness practice that I mentioned before, that
Uh huh.
definitely plays big part because with mindfulness practice, what we do is we are sharpening our awareness so that we become aware of those gut feelings, those intuitions, and once we are aware of it, and then we have the option to decide, do I look away because it's uncomfortable, or do I become the warrior that I tell myself I am, to look
Yeah,
at the discomfort and then see what it is, to look the truth in the eye. That's how I describe it.
I love it. And awareness is like the first crack in the matrix, right?
Always.
And suddenly, like you start seeing the code, and you realize you can rewrite it. I think that's the biggest thing that I take away from like your opening, and just your story that you were sharing with me when we first met, is that you don't have to like just run on the hamster wheel and keep going and going and going. And a lot of times when we just going and going and going, we passing like the precious moments.
Mm.
We passing all of those pressing moments, and mindfulness like forces you to absorb everything that's happening right there in that moment. And it's been real huge for me too. Okay, so so I guess my question before I like lead up to more about code is, did you even realize at that point when you just stopped and said like, man, I'm really going on cruise control here? Was there like some awareness that happened in that moment?
Yeah, so when I look deeper, so now I can tell the whole story in, like in 1 minute, but it took me a
Hmm.
lot of inner work because I was then forced to answer the questions. Okay, if I don't want to go in this direction, why did I believe that I had to go in this direction?
Right.
Right? So I mentioned to you about the list. If I already have all the things on this list, and apparently this is not even my list. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
whose list is it then? And then I did the journey of understanding, in my case, it was the list from my parents. Like they
Hmm.
had a specific idea of what success means for them. And in the beginning, thanks to awareness as well, I felt the resentment, I would say, towards my parents because I was like, hey, you were forcing me to go in this direction.
Right.
But it's not long. It's just maybe just for a couple of moments. And then I realized they were not forcing anything. It
Hmm.
was me who was not able to tell them what my decisions are. What do I
Mm.
actually want? And then I questioned myself, why did I not pull out my arguments to tell them, hey, I
Yeah.
want to do this? And then I got humbled because the answer was, I did not know what I wanted. So
Right.
how can I communicate it outside if I didn't know what I want? And then how come you don't know what you want? Like all of these
Yeah.
questions. And I was like, because I never spent conscious time to ask myself those hard questions.
Hmm.
I'm blessed that if someone gives me things to do and I put enough work in it, I will flourish in it. I will thrive in it. I see it as my blessings. And at the same time, it's also a curse because then, as I mentioned before, if I just go full throttle and I forgot I'm not the one who's putting the direction on the map,
Right.
and then I end up somewhere far but not where I want to be. So then I had to pull the handbrake and then see, like, okay, stop. And and that was an important moment for me as well, to remind myself the resentment towards my parents are not helpful at all, because they
Yeah.
also did their best, whatever that means, however the
Hmm.
form looks like. That was what's possible for them. That was their best. So I changed that, change this seed of resentment, I change it into gratitude, and it works. Gratitude is just, I got goosebumps every time I speak about gratitude, because I think that's the antidote of resentment. I think that's the antidote of, bitterness. If you just realized,
Yeah.
bro, what are you talking about? You had the chance to study abroad, even though
Hmm.
they bought just the one ticket for me to Germany, and then how I live over here, I needed to finance my life. But then you you don't want to be grateful for that, so that was
Yeah.
like the conversation that I
Right.
had with myself. So I changed it into gratitude. I pulled the handbrake, and then, Marcus, the next step is I had to allow myself to answer that questions. If it's not in the engineering realm, what is it then?
Mm.
And that is something that, for me, it's a form. We might use a little bit, a couple of abstract words over here. We can go deep into it, if you're interested, but I'm going to use the word self love. So,
Hmm.
me allowing myself to explore that question is actually an act of self love. It's just like, I was just imagining, if my best friend come to me and say like, "Hey, there's this very difficult question that I need to answer, and it's for my life." How would I speak to him? Will I say like, "You don't have time, bro, you got to answer it in 10 minutes," or do I tell him like, "All right, take your time, have a structure, take out your book, start writing. What are your dreams? What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of family do you want to build?" And all of those things, and then I
Yeah.
allowed myself proactively to explore that, even though I think you can imagine all of the insecurities came into my head, because then if I start comparing, but my friends already built their family, or my neighbors already have these cars, or my
Hmm.
colleagues already achieved this, but comparison is bananas. Comparison is,
Yeah.
it's a cliche, because there's a truth in it. When you hear the sentence, comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Right.
So yeah, so I had to allow myself to time and resource in form of energy and attention and the work to answer that question.
So much to unpack right there, and I love it. And I can take a lot from that, and we're gonna address it in a second here. But we're gonna take a quick pause to like kind of acknowledge. Just speaking of code, just that Bayou, he has like an awesome way that he breaks down these 6 ingredients to transform your life. And I call it a recipe. It's definitely a recipe for awesomeness. But instead of baking a cake, you're baking a better version of you. So I know you're gonna have something cool to offer them, and we're gonna put it in the description. Maybe tell them a little bit about what their future self is gonna thank you for.
Oh, okay. So what I do is I help men to, again, this might sound a little bit abstract, to come closer to themselves, so then they
Hmm.
can build their own meaningful life,
Yeah.
and that's a big word, that's a big sign, I'm aware of it. And how I do it is I'm trying to break it down into specific structure, and to do so, to create that meaningful life, i've I wrote a book, which, just you mentioned, there's this specific ingredients. It's almost like you need this all of these 6 ingredients to create something consciously and proactively, because sometimes life forces you to do so. So, an example, if someone has a near death experience, accident, you know and a lot of times, after they survive those accidents, they start to like questioning all of this,
Yeah.
all of their values, right? What is it? Why am I even here? What am I working? If I'm not even able to spend time with my family,
Hmm.
what is it? What am I doing over here? So we go closer to ourselves to answer this difficult questions, because what meaningful life means for me is different than for Marcus, is different than for others, right? And that's the key, to have the clarity and then the courage to build one.
Back to the interview now officially. So let's transition here, Bayou, and those who are continuing to like follow along with us. And I know there's a lot of men that listen to this podcast, and they struggle. You mentioned it earlier, that man struggle, you struggle. Especially to connect with emotions. And how does that usually tie into this whole meaningful life thing?
Hmm. So the role of emotions. First, we need to understand the role of emotions first, the dynamic between thoughts, feelings, and or emotions, and the actions that we are doing. So this triangle is usually on autopilot, right? Because of specific perception that we have through the things that happen to us. We start
Hmm.
thinking in a certain way, and because we think in a certain way, we feel a certain way, and there's a dynamic over there. Sometimes
Yeah.
because we feel in a certain way, the type of thoughts that we are creating are also aligned with the way we are feeling, and then our actions are colored by those, by the thoughts and by the emotions. Now, the importance of emotions is not that differently. First, we must understand that they influence the thoughts and the actions, number one. And number two, if we feel some type of emotions, how can I regulate my emotions so I can still make a wise action?
Mm.
That means if I am angry and Marcus, you come and annoy me, and my tendency, I would like to shout to you and maybe curse or do something that's going to be hurtful for you and for me after,
Okay.
just because I am angry. But if I'm aware that I have that anger in me, that I feel that type of feelings and emotions, and I know how to regulate it, I still can make a wise decision towards you,
Yes.
right? And usually, if we don't have that knowledge, if we don't have that awareness, we bring the word awareness back. If we don't have that awareness, we just become it's almost like we say, I can't do anything else. So we are completely steered by our emotions.
Yeah. Stuck.
That's on one
Yeah.
spectrum. We are completely steered by our emotions.
Hmm.
On the other spectrum is not better, because on the other spectrum is I will always act happy and positive and helpful to others, even though I am completely destroyed inside. I am super lonely. I am super depressed, but I'm not going to show it outside, and I'm going to suppress all of these emotions.
Hmm.
That's the other side of the spectrum. So, nor being steered, not being steered by emotion, nor ignoring the emotions, these are not good. These
Right.
are not helpful.
Yeah.
And that's why once we have the ability to become aware and to know what to do with it, we create rooms for emotions, we see them, we acknowledge them. But then again, becoming that CEO of our lives, or we still create that wise decisions as good as possible. We are human, we will always make mistakes, but then
Hmm.
try to learn from every mistakes and just make wiser and wiser and wiser decisions. Now that's why it's extremely important to work on, let's say the word is our emotional intelligence.
Hmm. That really brings it back center too, because the CEO is a perfect analogy, is a perfect uh, picture of what you should be doing with all of these things that's happening within you, and that's coming at you externally as well. And that whole, you on one opposite end of the other. I picture going, oh, do you want to go to the North Pole or do you want to go to the South Pole? But why not just go to the equator?
Correct.
you know and I have been on both of those sides, and seeing myself just really, either eventually blow up, because you either can go blow up right away if you, just all the time, or
Hmm.
or if you just, oh, I'm happy, but it's going to be some type of pop. There's going to be some type of moment that happens and say, geez, I really regret it, and you don't know what that regret might be, and you don't want to wait for that regret to happen. So I know where you decided to make that ditch, uh, from engineer to coaching, and like a lot of us who go into coaching, sometimes it could be anything that can drive us there. When we finally get it, like, aha, that's it. So for you, was it a robot revolt or something? And I'm just being sarcastic and kidding at the same time. But really though, seriously, what was it that made you ditch engineering for coaching once you got there? You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So once I did, once I chose, I mentioned to you, I allow time to answer. If it's not
Yeah.
engineering, and then what, right?
Right.
So I allowed myself to test the ideas that I had in my head,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
I gave myself time, because when I was working as an engineer, I had ideas, a lot of ideas, Marcus, but I
Mhm.
always had that excuse. I cannot execute these ideas because I have to go to work. After work, I'm already too tired.
Yeah.
On weekend, I just want to rest. So, and that became my excuse of not trying, of not working hard, right?
Hmm.
So then now I left my job. I took that leap of faith. I burned the boat, however you want to say it. I had no, if I still don't execute the ideas, well, that would be a proof that I'm a bullshitter. And I'm not
Right.
one. I don't want to be one. That's
Yeah.
why I needed to
Yeah.
execute the ideas. So I did a lot of things. I had ideas from um so I used, when I studied here in Germany, I actually earned my money through dancing. I was teaching dance.
Okay.
So I was like questioning, okay, should I go into dancing, or should I go into, YouTube vlogging and da 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 da. And I am that type of person. I don't know if you can relate. If I eat something, I always leave the best bite at the last, as the last.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I that's how I
Yeah.
approach it as well. So
Hmm.
I already knew that there is the seed of interest in psychology, in personal development, mostly as well because of the mindfulness practice that I did back in 2015. That was,
Yeah.
I'm not over exaggerating if I say that that was a life changing event. So after testing the mini ideas, I
Hmm.
finally lean into the psychology thing, and then I did coaching training, right?
Okay.
So when I did that coaching training, it was for 6 months every day from we started. So it's a full time, 8 until 5 p.m. We had a lot of coaching moments, so it was very practical as well. So it's not just the theory. And Marcus, I'm not lying to you when I say in the first week I had the thought, so this is how it feels like when you are studying something that you are really interested in.
Wow.
I was like,
Yeah.
wow, you know. And then at that moment, again, it became my habit already to cultivate the gratitude. The thought that came up in my head was, so it was all a time wasting, all of this time that I work as an engineer, you
Yeah.
know. So it's they just I just want to complain in my head. And
Hmm.
then again, I used the antidote. It definitely was not a time wasted, because studying something, the academic, the engineering part is one thing, but to survive that, I became
Yeah.
the man I am today because of my experience. So there is nothing wasted in that. And now as well,
Mm.
in my work as a life coach, I used to say my job as a process engineering was, I see a process and then I look where I can optimize the process better.
Okay.
I'm doing the exact same thing, Marcus. But now, just like you mentioned, it's not a recycling process, but it's a human process. I mentioned to you the dynamic between thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And if this is a process, okay, what can I do so the input is more higher quality, and then the
Hmm.
output in forms of actions is also of a higher quality, so that the inner world, which is our well-being, and then the outer world, which is our relationship with others and our material success, that both are aligned, and then we don't have to choose, do we want to be rich and miserable, or do we want to be poor and happy? How about rich and happy? Sounds a good
Yeah.
deal to me.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea that you waited till you got to that very it probably you probably had other ideas too, but you had a really good feeling that like that's where you was headed to, and but you gave yourself time to organically go into it. A lot of people don't do that. They do things for a lot of reasons, and um, but they don't do it with intention, because they're not stopping and taking that moment. Um, so I want to get practical with you. You mentioned co-creator, and a lot of this sounds so much like that, like what you mentioned earlier. And I would assume that it is, and my viewers and listeners would assume too. But how much control do we actually have though with our lives? Given all the external crap and BS that happens. I mean, it can happen at any moment.
Mm-hmm. Talking about the control in our lives and becoming the co-creator.
Hmm.
Mm. And before I answer that, I had a thought when you mentioned, I gave myself time, and there was one more quality that I had in my pocket, and that quality was faith.
I
You
love it.
know, faith that it will work, the best result will be created.
Yes.
And I am humble enough to say that I don't know how the best result looks like,
Hmm.
you know, because in my past, I want to solve my problems and create a result only in the way that I can imagine of, only having the results that I thought was the best of me. And then I was mad that if the results is not attained, but then after some time I look back, I was so grateful that it did not go the way I wanted it to. So it was indeed a blessing, but I was just still so dumb and that I did not realize it yet. Right.
Right.
So coming to your questions, how much control do we actually have into our lives? And the answer to that, in my personal experience and in my observation, is we cannot control the outcome of our doings at all. We cannot
Hmm.
control results. We cannot control how the world acts towards us. We actually, a lot of things we cannot control.
Yeah.
But our attitude towards those things, 100% in our hand. The way we think is 100% in our hands. The way we act is 100% in our hand. The way we react to it, the way we respond to it, it's 100% in our hand. And that is why the awareness thing that we speak in the beginning of our conversation, that's become such a important quality, because if we lose the awareness of our power in controlling
Mhm.
our minds and our actions, what do we have left? You know,
Yeah.
it's all, and that's why now if we go into, because a lot of clients come to me in topics of relationships, that they struggle in their relationships because they feel like, my wife, my girlfriend, my partner, they're not acting the way I want them to. And I
Oh, you
was
hear that
like,
so much nowadays.
so, and then I was like, this
Yeah.
is what's hurting you is not your partner, but your
Hmm.
own expectation towards your partner. And by the way, I bet you have expectation not only to your partner, but probably you also have expectation to the world, on how the world
Hmm.
should act towards you. And your heart is being beaten up every single day because
Yeah.
your expectations are not met. So where is the control then? The control is in the expectation part
Right.
that we can control. And reminding ourselves, this is also a part in my work, dissecting a situation and then creating a clear line in the middle. These are the things that I can control. These are the things that I cannot control.
Hmm.
For example, in our conversation, the thing that we can control is I can do my part to, with my intention, to bring the best value for you and for the audience. Now,
Yeah.
will the audience see this as a value? I cannot control.
Yeah.
I can keep working, I can learn, I can hone myself, I can work on myself, but how it becomes, how the results are, it's outside of my control. And one last sentence into that. And that is why it is like a gambling if we connect our self worth with the results that we are creating,
Hmm.
be it material things, or if I am able to make my partner happy, or so these are I think a very dangerous game, because it's almost like your well-being is depending on someone else's decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes a lot of humility to say what you said. You know, you got to be humble to yourself. You got to be humble, to the fact that like there's so many different possibilities, and you don't know which one's gonna happen. It may not even be any of the possibilities that you thought about. First we can only think so infinite. Okay, I think I made up a new word. Maybe I did. I think I'll go back and check that. But there's infinite possibilities, and our thought process cannot number them all. And even if we did, we still wouldn't be prepared for them. And like you said, we only can control what's going happening within us, um, and just don't be so married to to the results, to the outcome, or sometimes we get married to the process, and totally lose track of like of what our true purpose, true intention is. And when you get caught up in the process, it's like, oh, okay, let me stop here and check on this. Let me stop here and check on this. But like, have you checked in with yourself? Have you checked in and see if this aligns with your values? Uh, and like you said, the secret is faith. Faith has been so good to me. But as I lead with the last question, there's so many people who's going to hear this is like, oh yeah, screw this, I'm quitting my job tomorrow to find my purpose. And you know what happens? Sometimes it results in a total meltdown. And what
Hmm.
advice do you have for people to avoid that total meltdown?
Hmm. So I want to remind everyone as well, and also in my work, the message here is not to quit your job. That's not the message. The message is that exact sentence when I mentioned to you what I do is I help people get closer to themselves.
Mhm.
That means if you if you're aware of, you are not satisfied with something in your life, lean into it. Look at the discomfort, get closer to yourself, because that discomfort is sending you a message,
Yeah.
you know and spend some time, really commit some time for yourself to just sit down with your thoughts and your feelings. I always suggest to write them down, because then it literally is out of your system, like from your
Yeah.
head, from your heart. It's now on paper and you can read it as if it's a novel, right? And then when you read what you just wrote, see it through compassionate eyes. I know it sounds another big word, oh, by you, compassion, you know, but see it really as
Yeah.
if your best friend just wrote a letter,
Hmm.
and then see what is it actually that he's trying to say. And then once you are able to see that, you know, practicality, just like you mentioned before, it's so beautiful that you mention it. Sometimes we just lose also in the process, but not seeing, the KPIs or where is it that we want to go. So
Yeah.
it's a balancing act, and that's why the awareness is super important, to remind ourselves again and again, why are we doing this in the very first space. So we keep, just to check, are we still moving in the path that we chose? Are we still
Right.
moving in the path, in the direction that we want to go to, right? uh, there's a beautiful picture. It's almost like riding a bicycle. So when
Hmm.
you see someone is riding a bicycle, you see as if that person is riding in a straight line. But in actuality, like they're always balancing. Sometimes it's a little bit to the left, sometimes a little bit to the right. They're always micro balancing. But from the macro point of views, it seems like that person is going straight, right?
Yeah.
So this balancing act happens, right? While we are going where we want to go. So coming back to your questions, yeah, these are all big decisions. So what should I do? That will be the first things, because understanding myself, having that awareness about my state of being, and then understanding my desired state of being, and
Hmm.
then calculating the risk, practicality as well, just like you mentioned. So don't quit your job tomorrow if then the day after tomorrow you are panicking, and then how do I pay my rent?
Yeah.
Create that, let's say, risk management. And
Hmm.
then that quality that both of us mentioned before, faith, because you will never know, have the humility to accept blessings, from
Yeah.
God, universe, the higher self, from love, however you want to call it. Have the humility to accept help from others. And then once you combine everything, just like you mentioned, Marcus, things will happen that you wouldn't be able to think about it right now, because it's out there, and you need to take that leap of faith to unlock them and to welcome them into your life.
Wow, God is good, and by you, you are good. This has been like real mind blowing, man. Some stuff that like I needed to hear again myself to just be a friendly reminder. So these podcasts help me too in the process, and you're giving us like the permission slip to like question everything and the tools that actually build something better. And I just want to tell my transformers out there, if this sparks something in you, you want to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this message along the way. Discuss this in the comment sections, because by you, I'm going to give you the comments that whatever we get, whatever feedback we give. Um, what's one thing you're going to do today to take back control of your narrative? That's the question that we should be discussing. Um, that's the question that I'm going to roll in my head over and over again. Bayou, it's been a pleasure, man. Anything else you want to put out there before I you know exit before we exit the episode?
I want to say thank you for the chance. I want to show gratitude. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation. And I hope that from our conversation, Marcus, I hope that good seeds are out there, and then I hope that these good seeds are spreaded towards your audience, and then whomever meet with your work, with my work, and then may we all walk on the path that are aligned with ourselves.
That's great, man. So Bayou's my brother now, and make him, part of the family as well, you guys. And we will check you guys out next time. And many blessings, peace, and lots of love.
I stand for what you stand for. I'm at your door like the landlord. I can see the future, yeah, I fast forward. I get on the mic and I transform. Follow me, I'm in rare form. Follow me on this world tour. The asteroid that you can't avoid.